Kaliya Mardan. The story of Krishna and Kaliya is told in the 16th chapter of the 10th canto of the Bhagavata. The proper home of Kaliya, as the serpent was called, was the island of Ramaka, but he had been driven away from there in fear of Garua, the foe of all serpents. Garua had been cursed by the yogi Sobri dwelling at Vrindavan so that he could not come to Vrindavan without meeting his death. Therefore, Kaliya chose Kalindi, Yamuna, river in Vrindavan as his residence, knowing it was the only place where Garua could not come. In the Kalindi there was a certain pool where Kaliya resided, and its water boiled because of the fire of his poison. Birds flying over it would fall, dead, into its waters. All plant and animal life on the shore died because it came into contact with the poisonous vapor that by the wind was carried from the waves. Krishna had descended to subdue the wicked. Seeing how severely the river was contaminated by the terribly effective, powerful poison, he climbed in a kadamba tree, slapped his arms, tightened his belt, and jumped into the poisoned water. The water of the serpent's lake in turmoil from the poison that the snake was vomiting, because of the force of the fall of the essential person, started to overflow on all sides so that its fearsome waves washed over the shore for 100 bow lengths. What an immeasurable strength that was! When the Kaliya heard the sound that Krishna produced while he, playing like a big elephant, with his mighty arms, was engaged in whirling the waters around, Kaliya rushed forward, unable to tolerate the violation of his territory. And while he, so attractive in his yellow garments, and as delicate as a glowing white cloud, with the Srivatsa, his smiling beautiful face, and with his feet, which resembled the inside of a lotus, thus fearlessly was playing, he was angrily bitten in the chest by Kaliya, and enveloped in his coils. Seeing him in the grip of the snake's coils being immobilized, his dear friends, the tenders of the animals, were greatly disturbed. With their intelligence bewildered, in pain and full of remorse and fear, they fell to the ground, for they had dedicated everything, themselves, their relations, their wealth, their wives and objects of desire to Krishna. The cows, the bulls and the she-calves, with their eyes fixed on Krishna, cried out loudly in great distress while they fearfully lamented in shock. Thereupon most fearsome, ominous disturbances arose in Vraja. 3 kinds of signs, to be observed in the sky, upon the earth and in the living beings, heralded imminent danger. The cowherds, headed by Nanda, who saw these signs, were beset with fear. They knew that Krishna herding the cows had left without Balram. Not knowing his prowess, they were overwhelmed by pain, grief and fear. Because of those bad omens they thought that something bad had happened and could only think of him, who was their very life breath. The children, the elderly and the ladies, all felt as wretched as a cow missing her calf, and anxiously set out to look for Krishna. Balram, the sweet Supreme Lord, seeing them that distressed, gently smiled and did not speak a word, knowing well the power of his younger brother. Searching for their dear most Krishna, they followed the trail marked by the footprints of the Lord. They led to the bank of the Yamuna. Quickly they followed the marks of the lotus, the barleycorn, the elephant goad, the thunderbolt, and the flag of the master of the cowherd community, which they here and there, dispersed between other footprints, saw on the cow path. When they at a distance saw Krishna motionless within the lake enveloped by the coils of the snake body, and the cowherd boys lying unconscious in the flooded water with all the animals crying around them, they in their distress were delivered to the greatest despair. Now that their sweetheart was seized by the serpent, the gopis who in their hearts were so attached to him, the supreme, unlimited personality, while remembering his loving smiles, glances and words, were tormented by the greatest agony. Being deprived of their darling, they experienced the 3 worlds as being completely empty, holding back Krishna's mother. They, with their eyes fixed upon her son, equally pain shed a flow of tears. Standing there like corpses they stared at Krishna's face, and one by one recounted the stories about the darling of Raja. Nanda and his men seeing Krishna, their life and soul, were by the all-powerful Lord Balram, who knew well the might of Krishna, withheld to enter the lake. When he, the only one they had, for some time was caught in that position and saw how his cowherd folk on his behalf were standing there in utter despair together with the women and children, he put an end to his imitation of the mortal way, the illusion of his mortality, and rose up from the coils of the serpent. By expanding his body, the serpent was forced to let him go because of the pain. Kaliya thereupon furiously raised his hoods high, breathed heavily through his nostrils that were like to vessels of boiling poison, and stared the Lord in the face with eyes like firebrands. Kaliya, moving his double-pointed tongue to and fro between his two lips, and with his terrible look full of poisonous fire eagerly spying for an opportunity to strike, was by him playfully approached from all sides by moving around him like he was the king of the birds, Garuda. Thus turning around him, he exhausted him and forced him to bend down his highly raised shoulders. Krishna thereupon climbed on top of the broad heads, and then, as the original one, the first spiritual master of all the arts, started to dance. His lotus feet in touch with the snake, therewith turned red from the light of the many jewels on the heads. That very moment his servants arrived together with their wives, the heavenly singers and perfected souls, the sages and the venerable souls. Taking notice of him being engaged in his dancing, they all were greatly pleased and expressed their joy with playing two-sided clay drums, smaller drums and large drums, and with songs, flowers and other forms of praise. Whichever of Kaliya's 101 heads would not bow down, were immediately trampled down by Krishna. The Lord, who with his kicking feet punishes the evil ones, made the serpent, that still moved but the life of which ran at its end, spit horrible, poisonous blood from its mouth and nostrils, while it experienced the greatest anguish. Poison oozed from his eyes, and whichever wanting head that he breathing heavily in his anger would rise, Krishna, while dancing, with his foot forced down into submission. Every time that happened, he with flowers was worshipped for being the original person. Profusely wanting blood, with his numerous hoods broken and with his body defeated by his amazing dancing, Kaliya remembered the oldest person, Lord Narayana, the spiritual master of all moving and non-moving entities. Within his mind he turned to him for shelter. Seeing that the serpent got tired of the heavy weight of the heels of Lord Krishna, in whose abdomen the entire universe is found, and that his umbrella-like hoods were shattered by his trampling, his wives in distress approached the original Lord with their clothing, ornaments and locks of hair in disarray. Innerly totally upset approaching for shelter, they laid their bodies and children on the ground before him, the Lord and refuge of all creatures. They bowed down, saintly joined their hands and solicited the liberation of their sinful husband. Krishna asked Kaliya to leave the river and return to Ramaka island, where he promised that Kaliya would not be troubled by Garuda.